a woman and a man looking at a painting, and a lady saying, "Look at the colors, look at the sunshine, look at the rays that are hitting his face," and the man is saying, "Wow, that barn needs to be painted." And it is a little, it's a bit funny, a bit exaggeration of, but they're perceiving that painting quite a bit differently.
Hey friends, and welcome to Go for 10. Our goal with this show and company is to bring you the actionable knowledge, the how-tos, so that you can take action and have faster success and happiness in your life and business. We are confident that what we share works because we only interview the people who have actually done it, since the fastest way for you to get to the next level in your personal and professional life is to follow the people who have been there and done it. Our expert guests fearlessly challenge the status quo and outdated paradigms to achieve results that are way beyond the average. So stay tuned to today's episodes if you want to go for 10 in your leadership, relationships, and your perception powers. Our guest today is a Fulbright specialist, full professor, and a department chair of the Advanced Management Studies at the Forbes School of Business and Technology at the University of Arizona Global Campus. She's an expert in e-learning development and implementation in the developing world, and a board member at the Center of Women's Leadership at the Forbes School of Business and Technology, launched in June 2020. She's published in over 20 plus peer-reviewed journals, and her research ventures took her to Haiti, Cuba, Mexico, Panama, Jordan, Zambia, the Balkan region, and many other parts of the world. The co-author of The Power of Perception, Dr. Maya Zelihic. Welcome, Doctor.
Hello, thank you so much, Shane. Thank you for having me, and hello to all of your listeners.
Absolutely welcome. I'm so excited, Maya, because, I've spent some of my life in the corporate world, and then I shifted over into personal development. And for the last few years, I've been trying to meld both, to bring the personal development into the professional development. And I was so thrilled in the book to see, words like, our belief systems, the root cause, cognitive biases, reticular activating system. So I'm excited about the book and what you guys are doing. I think it's going to bridge a very important gap and will be transformational. So let me start off at the start. What made you guys choose, you and Dr. Hamilton, to choose perception? What in your research led you to say this is a challenge as well as an opportunity?
Well, we started looking at certain patterns of behavior within organizations, and we were trying to understand which variables impact the effectiveness, business sustainability, and ultimately motivating the employees in order to do better and striving to do better. So one of the things that we've discovered is that our perception is, as we know, everywhere, and it's impacting all of our layers of life, business arena being no exception. So what we've decided to do, we've actually decided to focus on that particular concept, trying to study how we perceive. What type of variables, what type of mechanisms are impacting our perception mechanisms and the perception of others, and how's that correlating into that concept of global leadership, and what can we do if we eliminate the boundaries within our own perception? What can this do for us as individuals or employees within a company, or ultimately leaders?
Okay, absolutely. So as you spoke about eliminating boundaries, that's your subtitle, eliminating boundaries to create successful global leaders. What are some of the boundaries that you see that, our perception biases would have created for leaders? What are some of those boundaries?
Well, we are, looking at some of the things that we've studied. We looked at our culture in general. We looked at the concepts such as emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence. You mentioned some of the cognitive biases that we are sometimes aware of, sometimes not aware of. And when someone says, well, I don't have any biases, we all do. We just have to be aware of those and recognize them and attempt to control them in certain settings. We looked at our gender differences. We also looked at, we talked a little bit about spirituality and how that impacts perception. And all of those variables together are impacting who we are as individuals and how we perceive reality. So, for example, you and I are talking this morning, and we already are forming perception of each other. And that is not based on this quick encounter. We chatted for like 5 minutes prior to the show, but this is based on who we are and all the baggage we brought to this table of this podcast this morning. We are, I may, you may look at me and I may remind you of someone based on an experience, or you had another person on the show and maybe you had a tech issue of some sort with that person. Now all of a sudden you're like, well, I hope I don't have a tech issue right this second. So what's happening is we are learning how to recognize a lot of those things in order to be open-minded and in order to absorb this reality, which we touched upon Greek philosophers. Is there such a thing as a true reality versus whatever we form in our minds? But eliminating some of those boundaries is enabling us to open ourselves to the process that is leading us to effective leadership.
Okay. So absolutely. Really, really interesting. And the book is so well researched. It's amazing. And you go, many different places, so to speak, in terms of the Greek mythology, spirituality. Guys, you really need to get your hands on this book. So what in your research have found to be the major factors that shape our perceptions, that influence what we believe and why we believe what we believe? What were those major factors?
Well, each of us, Diane and I were coming from different cultures. Diane was born and raised in the United States, and I was born and raised in the southeast of Europe, the Balkan region in particular that you've mentioned. We had a vastly different life experiences. We had vastly different parents. And the first layer of differences comes from those, upbringing, our culture, our life experiences. And then also we do share some common factors, common variables with all different individuals. For example, we talked about gender. We have in one of our chapters, we're talking about a woman and a man looking at a painting. And a lady saying, look at the colors, look at the sunshine, look at the rays that are hitting his face. And the man is saying, wow, that barn needs to be painted. And it is a little, it's a bit funny, a bit exaggeration of, but they're perceiving that painting quite a bit differently. A male observant is approaching them from a practical standpoint. What can I do for this particular setting to be a bit more effective? Versus a lady maybe going into looking more at the feelings and the emotions that painting brings. So our gender will impact that as well. Intelligence, of course, is impacting perception. Okay. But we venture out to say that emotional intelligence is actually more impactful. Recently, I did a very, very small blog article, and I was working in the financial industry years prior to going into the world of research and academia. And one time we had a middle-level manager. Every single employee on his team, around 11 or 12 of them, complained to the upper managers, saying that he is horrific. He's no leader. No one liked him. He was belligerent. He's not motivating. And I still remember observing that situation, him saying, I'm a terrific leader. I'm a perfect leader. Mm-hmm. And at the time, of course, I was not investigating and looking into perception. I just said to myself, why is he so clueless? What is happening is what he intended to project is not what the others are seeing. So his intentions might have been okay, but whatever he was thinking of himself and projecting is absolutely not what the others were seeing. Wow. So that disconnect between what am I trying to project here right now talking to you? What are you trying to project as you're engaging with your audience members? Is that what they see? Is that what they perceive? Mm-hmm. And where's the disconnect if not?
Wow. That's really incredible because I guess it's an everyday encounter for years in terms of organizations where there's such a drastic perception difference between how employees see leaders and what leaders think that they're actually doing. So you had, in terms of the major factors, you did have mentioned gender as well as intelligence. What are other factors that shape our perceptions?
Well, it's also, we cannot underestimate the power of spirituality. And we
Okay.
were using the word spirituality intentionally versus one being religious because
Yeah.
it's quite a bit different. So whether one's spiritual making is that of being of a religious nature or not, that is a deeply personal conversation that we didn't want to venture into.
Mhm.
But our system of beliefs, what we believe in or what we don't believe in at the same point of time, it's impacting the way we're perceiving world.
Yeah.
The going back to one's childhood, some of those teachings, and we're consistently shaping our perception. Hopefully a well-formed individual is not going to perceive things the same as they have in their 20s, in their 40s, or their 50s. So hopefully this concept is constantly polishing itself and constantly getting to the point where it's more effective. The bottom line is, let us have our perception work for us versus against us. If we are leaders, the way we communicate, the way we interact is of incredible importance. Perception impacts both of those quite a bit. We developed a perception power index that goes with the book, and we actually are engaged in discussing it with many different companies that are interested in the training and the book. And we developed what we call the EPIC process. So it's kind of easy to remember. So if you want me to, I can actually give your listeners just a glimpse into that EPIC process.
Sure, absolutely.
So the EPIC process is, at its very core, E is evaluate. So the evaluation component is being aware of the situation. Examine your own beliefs and values that bring you to that situation. So being aware of oneself. Again, it is always good to check with yourself, what am I projecting versus what I want the others to see? And let's just say sometimes, you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like doing a show, or I don't feel like teaching a class. Well, at that point of time, we have to force ourselves a little bit. So maybe what we're projecting is a bit not as genuine as how we feel, but we are aware, we're evaluating it in reference to what the others may see. So that is that E of EPIC. P is predict. We're predicting, we're being aware of the others, we're predicting the situation. It's as if to say, I know how you feel about the situation, but how will others feel about that situation? Predicting your reaction. Is someone interested in what I have to say? Is someone open to the discussion that we may have as leaders? Maybe we're trying to close a deal. So just kind of predicting, anticipating what the others may perceive. And that is something that is very hard to polish unless you have years of experience, years of practice. So that is a P of the EPIC. Then you have interpret. And this is where you start with the emotional intelligence, another variable, critical thinking skills to navigate that evaluation and prediction steps. So you have to interpret everything and be adaptable during the interpretation process. How quickly do we form opinions? And we talked about the cognitive biases, and cognitive biases at their very core, we're not intending to harm. We're trying to get that mental shortcut, recognize the situation. Ultimately, why? To shield ourselves, to protect ourselves. So during the interpretation phase, we have to be mindful of all of that, including emotional intelligence and critical thinking skills. And then the final one is C, correlate. And that is the fourth element. Put it all together, all the sensory inputs, analyze, synthesize that data, and calculate, for the lack of better words, the appropriate response. One may say, oh, wow, this sounds a little bit complex. No, because we're doing it every single day, multiple times. What we're trying to do with this book is get the people to understand how it works, become more effective. As they're taking the index, they can figure out where they are as far as being aligned to that ideal concept of reality. And I always say in quotation marks, because we touched upon the Plato's allegory of the cave, where the prisoners are chained to the walls of the cave, and all they're seeing their entire life are the shadows on the walls of that cave. So am I seeing in the corporate setting, am I seeing the shadows that my mind created, or am I seeing whatever my leaders are trying to project? And with that understanding is, can we get to that average, ever so fluid concept of reality? Because if you and I are in the same conference room and our manager is giving us a particular message, your takeaway should not be, we're all done, we're all going to lose our job. And mine is, oh, this is such a terrific news, we're going to get salary increase. Well, you have two employees with such a vastly different perception. There is a disconnect. What was that reality? What was that manager saying? Maybe neither one of those two things, because we're on the two ends of the extreme spectrum.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's a little bit about the EPIC index, and a little bit, and any of the audience members, if they're interested in actually taking the index, they can go to the perceptionpowerindex.com and take it and just kind of assess where they stand, because it's when I took it, I knew that Diane and I would perceive things differently, because we worked together. We used to work together. And I felt that Diane was always a bit more optimistic. And I was the pessimist in certain work type of settings. And one of the conversations we originally had was, why am I seeing it that way? Why is she seeing it differently?
Absolutely. So if one were to take the power perception index, what are they going to get out of it? What is it going to, if I were to take it, what is it going to tell me exactly? So for people who are wondering if I should take this, what is going to be the end result? What am I going to find out about myself, really?
Well, the perception power index addresses the critical attributes of emotional intelligence in terms of making the recipient of the results understand how we perceive and understand our emotions and those of others. It further examines the intellectual and reasoning capabilities associated with our own intelligence, the critical thinking, and also is giving us an understanding where we are on the curiosity and the culture quotients. So we call that a CQ1 and CQ2. So curiosity and cultural quotients. And you talked to Dr. Diane before, so you know that she published a book on curiosity. So we are touching upon curiosity. One chapter is spent on curiosity. So you look at all the results, you understand where you are on on the entire spectrum. And then based on that, you can be more aware of your perception of others. The bottom line is, we wrote this book for everyone. It is written in a style that is pleasing to the general audience, because we're academic writers. We didn't want to write an academic book, because we know that academic articles are not read by many people. So this is a very easy to understand and read book, but it's teaching you what to do to become more effective, primarily in a business world as a leader, by understanding your perception and making it better aligned with a business reality. However, it is geared towards business world. It is geared towards leadership. But if we polish our perception, we will be able to interact better in all the venues of a personal life. Look at the relationships. I mean, those of us who are in any sort of relationships with our friends, with our spouses, significant others, boyfriends, girlfriends, you have a situation where all of a sudden you have a major fight. What happened? At the very core of the argument, very often is the perception disconnect. Because we go under the assumptions people are well-meaning. There's some troublemakers that always want to steer trouble and fights. But let's, under the assumption we're talking about two reasonable individuals, a lot of times the argument is a perception disconnect.
Absolutely. And while you, as you said, focused on business and leaders, looking at the book, definitely, I think humanity can really benefit from this because it's absolutely powerful work. But I understand that you have to sort of get into your niche and get in there. So I want to talk a little bit more about EPIC because the E of evaluation, and one of the challenges with leaders, especially when they get into that position, when the name is on the door, so to speak, that we feel like we have reached. Okay, and self-evaluation is often very difficult. It's often very difficult to accept certain things about ourselves. And this is where coaching comes in. But I heard a statistic yesterday that as much as 66% of CEOs don't have coaches. So it'll be really interesting to stay connected with you and see how the book and the training goes, and further data that you collect over a period of time in understanding the application of it. But I don't know if in any of your research you would have found what are some of the factors that inhibit self-evaluation, because it's the E, which is really the first step in the entire process. So what would you say to a leader looking on who says, I'm perfect, I'm a really good leader. What would you say to them to get them to actually look at a different perspective and probably take the perception power index?
Well, we were looking at different examples of leadership, and we actually were reflecting. And in the last, as we were doing research for the book, Dr. Diane's podcast, that she was interviewing leaders, she was always also trying to ask them at least one or two questions pertaining to perception. And one of the things that we know that study after study cite, that effective leaders see things that others do not. Mm-hmm. They sense when and when not to act. And that is a true skill. And what actions to take. So if they have a finely tuned perception from the business savvy to emotional, intelligent, that's what sets good leaders, effective leaders from others. So going back to my example, that leader was not seeing things that others, as a matter of fact, he was the only one. He was the only one. And so a lot of things is, they are able to hear the elements of the conversation that perhaps others are missing out on. And they tend to envision solutions, going back to that concept of anticipating. Then we can go back to that original that was never sold, nature versus nurture. And I would venture out to say that there is a concept of one needs to have at least a little bit of talent, a little bit of a natural disposition to be a leader in order to anticipate and see, but also humbling oneself and being open to the learning process. Because going back to your comment, what's preventing one from being that leader? A lot of times is the reasons are egoistic in nature. Not necessarily that one ventures out in the morning as we wake up saying we're perfect, but we're, especially in the Western Hemisphere, because I've done research throughout the world and interacted with different leaders as a Fulbright specialist and global researcher. We are taught in the Western Hemisphere that consistently to project confidence. However, it is okay at times for the leader to say, I'm not sure. Yeah. Would you mind giving me more information? I am not ready to make that decision yet. And I think that that's where we go back to the cultural aspects. For example, as I teach across the world, and a lot of times, thanks to the technology, you can wake up in the morning and teach, in another corner of the world, now that the world is not really open to travel. Sometimes I have classes where students are not asking as many questions. And at first I was perceiving that as if I'm boring. They're not following along. Yeah. Culturally, in certain cultures, that was perceived as a disrespect. So going back to the concept of leadership, projecting confidence, forcing that strength is at times creating the false perception, and we're not projecting what we're trying to project.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting because one of the examples that I gave that has stood out for over 20 years in my mind or stuck in my mind for over 20 years was a leader that I had a lot of respect for. And the thing that caused, or one of the things that caused that respect was admitting that I don't know. She said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable is also part of leadership. And it's really interesting that you speak from a cultural perspective. And one of the buzzwords these days is around authenticity. So that's going to be a real challenge now between people who think that they need to be and project a certain way versus being authentic. And I guess leaders are being bombarded with many different pieces of information. You have to project confidence regardless of the challenges. You have to be strong. And as you said, in the Western hemisphere, that's the culture. So what would you say to leaders looking on about authenticity, and what is their authentic self? I don't know if your book speaks to that.
Well, we don't necessarily touch upon it, ever so briefly. We talk about some different concepts addressing it. Well, knowing who you are, because a lot of times, as regardless of our age or experiences, each one of us is consistently seeking, and that is a good thing. Because if when someone says, I mean, no one likes those I know it alls. Right? Because if you know it all, well, what are you doing here? So we're consistently reinventing ourselves and trying to get into touch with understanding who we are as individuals. And then there is an understanding, not that we're faking, but there is that business persona versus someone, your friends may know you as a completely different person versus the one in a business setting. But focusing on the business setting, understanding who you are and who you want to be as a leader. And honestly, being mindful of what you're trying to communicate and convey in order to understand what you're trying to project. And there's nothing wrong with confidence. Yeah, I want to project confidence because no one wants to follow someone that is completely uncertain about, every single venue of the operation. Yeah. But as a leader, knowing myself as a leader, I feel if I were to define myself, not to go with the cliche labels, I feel like I do belong to that group of servant leaders. And I'm trying to form a relationship with people that work with me, understand where they're coming from, understand their needs, their desires, their motivations, in order for me to be able to successfully motivate them. And it is perfectly fine to, at times, you're not losing your points, you're not losing your confidence by asking someone else to also educate you and help you understand certain pieces of the process and consistently get them involved. Not necessarily just when we say delegate. No, get them involved, working with you to collaborate with you as we're making certain decisions in order for them to have that vested interest. And that's been working for me quite well. Okay. But I'm also talking about that concept of being humble. That has to be genuine. Because you're talking about authenticity. It's a big word for English as a second language. But the thing is, though, talking about my authentic self or your authentic self, is it genuine, or is it that persona that we've created to present that image of our authentic selves? Okay. So think about it in those terms, and do you know the answer to that? And I'm just now asking you. Yeah. I'm now pausing, thinking, who am I at the very core of my authentic self? And I feel I'm still seeking. Okay. And that is okay. Yes. Absolutely. And that's one of the discussions I have, because I like to challenge concepts of what exactly is your authentic self, because for the seekers, and I think myself, being one, is constantly changing who we are. So I think that, what you're doing in terms of both helping leaders and in there helping employees so that, we get to that middle faster, because if
if you also increase the power of perception of the employees, then I think we'll get to that middle ground a lot faster. Is that what you're suggesting as well?
Yes, because corporations ultimately, they want to have a sustainable business model. They want to have a motivated workforce in order to do better, to be more efficient, and to ultimately make more money. So this is of value to different corporations because through the training, they are understanding the perception of their employees. They're understanding their own perception, and their employees are understanding what the corporation is trying to get them to do. So ultimately increasing this can correlate to the increase of efficiency and motivation. And long gone are the times where the leader is basically telling, and I like to, in this example, like to use the word manager because that's not a leader. This is how we're going to do it, and because I'm the manager, and so companies are way more aware that they need to get the buy-in from their workforce, and in order to get that buy-in, there are many different techniques and there are many different concepts that are helping them do that. One thing, as we did this research, we were learning a lot about ourselves too. For example, as we were picking certain concepts within different chapters, you can tell that which particular areas were maybe more important to one of us versus the other. As we were picking, I'm going to do research on this, or I'm going to do research on that. Also, I personally, reflecting on my own perception, I think with me, it is not taking it personally and controlling my emotions. And Shane, I'm not going to lie to you. I am not there yet.
Okay.
There's no quick, immediate fix because we are who we are. And there's so many years that went into you becoming who you are or me becoming who I am, all these experiences. But what is our success? Being aware, being mindful, pausing. With me, with that emotional reaction, what I've learned, I've trained myself to pause, step back. You don't have to respond, Maya, right away. don't respond within 30 seconds. And just a few of those type of tips and type of advice that we have can help someone become more effective in a leadership setting, but that does translate into personal life too.
Okay, absolutely, because we are one being, so to speak. So if you increase your perception power, then it happens all around in your life. So the epic process, is it something that it's linear in a sense that you first need to evaluate and then predict what others might be doing? Because looking at it somewhere there, I think if you're able to do that evaluation, that self-evaluation, that self-awareness, that you'll be more open to understanding other people's perception. Do you think that's accurate?
Yes, but well, basically, we're trying to, first of all, at the very core, we're trying to work more effectively in a global, multicultural environment. This whole book has been written geared towards global perspective, because I think it's no longer realistic to talk about, individual perception of a particular culture, a particular country. So you're doing this linear, more conscious approach of being aware and better manage your perception. So it should, in ideal circumstances, should be first, you examine the major factors that shape your perception, that influence what you believe and why you believe. And that's that evaluate. Then you have the second, let's reflect on the impact of those factors, how they have impact in shaping our behaviors, interaction with the others. What are the others doing? What are the others thinking? Anticipate what they may do. Third is that we should analyze, figure out the new practical approach moving forward. Can we govern our perception? Can we control them a little bit better? And then acknowledge the epic nature of this process, being that if you go through all the steps in that linear manner, you are going to be more effective. Can you be so comfortable with your evaluation that you can jump to correlation right away? Sometimes you do it so quickly that you're not even aware, because none of us are interacting with others in terms of evaluate, predict, but you're sometimes preparing for a business meeting. You are going to go to the second step of the process, prediction, quite a bit. You're gonna, when we call it playing different scenarios. Well, what you're doing is you're predicting, and you're trying to increase your rate of success.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going into this meeting, I'm trying to close this deal. If they say this, I will say this. If they think this, I will, so what you're doing is, what are you doing? You're predicting. So maybe you're done with the evaluation phase already, because yet again, you're your authentic self, so you know who you are, and then you can go through the different stages a little bit quicker, and observe. One of the things that there are many stories that we have in the book, but it's like you have let's just say you go to a restaurant and there is some sort of a argument at the other table. Maybe a husband and wife are arguing and fighting, and here you are with whomever you are at that restaurant, and there is also a waitress there, and the three of you are looking at that situation. And let's say someone, not that anyone would, but someone asked you, what happened? You may say one thing, the person sitting next to you may say something completely different, and the waitress may see something completely different. Oh my God, they're gonna throw this plate. I mean, I'm gonna, she's looking at the damage to her restaurant. You, on the other hand, are saying, I cannot believe this man is allowing himself to embarrass. So we're seeing the same scenario, two people arguing, but we're picking the pieces that matter to us, and we're perceiving those variables that for whatever reason are ranked highest in our minds. And this is a simple example. That's why when we talk about the eyewitness testimonies when crimes happen, that's why sometimes we say that is so not reliable. Because everyone is focusing on another thing. You have one person describing the perpetrator down to every single piece of his clothing. Then you had another person not even being able to tell you if this was a heavy set man or a tall guy or a blonde guy, or, so you're saying to yourself, well, these two people were there. What do you mean? They were looking at something. They were observing different things.
Yeah.
So it's, so that's interesting as well to think about it in those terms.
Okay.
And we will never, our goal is not to align every perception, because this world would be such a boring place if we do.
Yeah.
So that is not our goal. Our goal is to become more effective, gain that power of perception, eliminate boundaries within your own mind. But our goal is not to have everyone think the same or perceive things the same, because first, that would never work. And secondly, it would not be a fun world to be in.
Absolutely. And I love the practical approach, because, one of the challenges in leadership has been these sort of soft woo-woo issues. And maybe before your book, perception would have been one of those ultra soft issues. So I love the practicality of it. I love the steps that you take people through in understanding themselves. So awesome stuff there. So we speak about eliminating boundaries to create successful global leaders. And one of the issues in terms of being a global leader is one of diversity and inclusion. And I see perception and our perception index directly impacting our ability to really be global leaders. Now, in 2020, we had a sort of increased awareness of the diversity and inclusion issue with the Black Lives Matter movement and that sort of thing. So is there anything in your book that speaks to, those racial biases that one may have, or is that within the whole context of our cultural upbringing?
We touch upon in the chapter on culture, we touch upon certain biases, and we are touching upon not only racial biases, we touch upon the biases when it comes to religion. We also touch upon those biases that are, labeling a person. For example, we were joking a little bit, and we were talking about that perception of blondes as not as intelligent as brunettes. So we were talking about those biases that are incredibly harmful, incredibly impactful, such as the racial and religious bias. And then you go down to those that are actually in a corporate setting can potentially be quite difficult to overcome. A perception of as a scenario, a perception of a beautiful lady being not as competent because of the way she looks or the way she behaves. We were done with the research for the book prior to, we were in the finishing stages for the books research prior to 2020 hitting us full steam ahead. We did go back and touch upon the pandemics. We were also mindful that this is a book that is relevant no matter the year, no matter the particular season or particular set of events. So we did not dwell into too many of the 2020 events because it was a very unique, it was a very off year, and it was a year of diversity of global leadership. Look at the way a global community responded to this pandemic, and look at the way how different global leaders acted and reacted as a result of this pandemic. There will be many studies explaining as to why one country acted in a certain manner versus the other. We were talking about, not in our book, but I'm answering your question, civil liberties and rights of individuals to wear or not wear a mask, or countries where the government is more in control, imposing certain restrictions at a bit heavier rate. I can see tons of books coming out dealing with those topics. Not really sure that I would be, or Diane would be the one touching upon some of those, but perception is impacting diversity of global leadership, and absolutely prejudice, injustice is impacting the way we perceive the world. Can we eradicate that? Well, I'm an optimist in that regards. I hope one day we will be able to, but us dismissing it and not acknowledging it would be too naive, because that is impacting perception, and that is impacting the way we interact. And through my global travels, I was so blessed and so thankful that I was able to encounter so many different individuals across the world. And I'm not saying this is a cliche. We have a beautiful, beautiful world with so many wonderful people. And I know for a fact through my travels, we have so many more good people than the bad ones. so we can, in our perceptions, we can focus on those.
Absolutely. And you did mention a little bit earlier that, it's, we probably never going to get to, everyone having the same perception, nor do we want it, because it wouldn't be a fun world. But at the same time, it's you mentioned in the book that they are our belief systems are printed into our memories as facts or universal truths, and that is one of the challenges in getting over our cognitive biases, is because we believe what we our perception as reality and believe it to be true. Okay, so does your the index actually help someone? So if I were to take it, does it tell me exactly what are my current belief systems, for example?
It is not going into the depth of your current belief system. It tells you the mechanisms, how your perception is shaped.
Okay.
But it's not going to give you the level detail of the belief system, because it's geared towards global community. It's geared towards everyone can take it. But we talked upon the concept of, since you mentioned beliefs, of suspension of one's beliefs. We did not say abandon your beliefs.
Right.
Suspend it for just a moment as you're perceiving. The spirituality chapter, and when we touched upon religion, was one that I was really focusing on, because I come from a very troubled area in the world, and I've seen what religious conflict and what the religious prejudice can do to others. So for me, I was saying to myself, I cannot go back in time and erase everything that happened, but being aware of why were people perceiving each other so differently, and using many vile mechanisms just based on the religious differences. That was a topic dear to my heart, because I've experienced what that does, the horrific nature of what that does in the long run. So no one's saying abandon your beliefs, revisit your beliefs, but we say suspend those as you interact. Honor yourself, honor your system of beliefs, also respect your own culture, be proud of your own culture, but be open to the culture of others. Be open to, because we always say, like, once you start traveling, you're not the same person that started
Yes.
those travels.
Yeah.
Maya, that came from a little place, Bosnia, in the southeast of Europe, is not the same Maya that now traveled across the world and interacted with cultures that prior to that period, sometimes I wouldn't even know.
No.
I pulled up a map. First time when I went to some places, I had to pull up a map and be like, and now I have some best friends there.
Yeah.
So it is truly beautiful to experience that, and you grow as a person and as an individual, and just having that yet again, humble yourself, be open-minded, and it's okay. And I'm talking so much, so now I'm going to defy what I'm doing. Be quiet as you observe. It's okay not to, and I promise you I can be quiet sometimes.
That's good. And is that quiet time, what are some of the things or quieting the mind, so to speak? Last year I published a book as well on leadership, and chapter 1 was about slowing down to speed up, and I speak about mindfulness and meditation. Is that a practice that you'd recommend to help leaders to be able to quiet the mind, to reflect, to see what no one else sees as a leader? What are some of the practical things that people can do to start that epic process?
Well, we have many great researchers and many great authors that talked about habits of successful people, and there's certain things that work for you. There's certain things that work for me, and I think we have to pick our own thing. Every single book that I've read says that successful people need to wake up early. Well, guess what, Shane? That's not happening for me. If you wake me up at 4 a.m., we're not talking. I am not in a good mood. And Diane and I would tease each other so much because she's such an early riser. So I said, I'll have to find something else to be successful, because that's not work. So you talk about meditation, and I think that's a powerful technique. We also have to be mindful and acknowledge it works for some, it doesn't work for everyone.
Okay.
It is finding your own, if someone relaxes by listening to a podcast, I actually relax listening to many podcasts as I'm driving my bicycle. Okay. If someone relaxes by watching Netflix, let's not pass judgment. Well, can't you read a book versus watch Netflix? If that person relaxes and recharges his or her batteries by watching something on Netflix, by all means. So I think find your own path, find some of the things that work, and also acknowledge the ones that you will never do. Okay. I am yet to, a lot of times on Facebook feed, I see people, they woke up and they are looking at the sunrise. And I said, you know what, I really love it in theory. One day maybe, but then I'm the one that can stay up till like 2 a.m. or something like that. But ultimately, find your own path. Don't judge the path of others within reason, as long as everyone's doing ethical, legal things. Okay. It is okay to question if you see something that is wrong, and see what helps you reflect and recharge. Okay. I had a little bit of a pet peeve last year. A lot of times I felt that in 2020, maybe a little off topic, but it's very, I don't want to get on my soapbox. I feel we've noticed toxic positivity in all layers of life, where people were forcing positive thinking on others, because we all want to get out of this situation together. It is okay to acknowledge that you're not okay. Yeah. And a lot of times I talked to some people in a business setting, and they were compelled to tell me 2020 was wonderful to reflect and recharge. And I said, wait a second, the world doesn't have to experience global pandemic for you to reflect and recharge. Yeah. That is my bias. That is the way I perceive their statement. I perceived it as inconsiderate to the victims. Yes. They didn't mean it that way. Yeah. And keep in mind, as I'm perceiving, I'm suspending it, and I'm quite, wait a second, Maya. They didn't mean it that way. Yeah. They didn't disrespect anyone. Why am I perceiving it that way? Yeah. So I think that it is wonderful to be positive as leader, but be mindful of that. It is a great day. Well, maybe it is not for me. Right. And I think that's also important. Okay. Absolutely. And so much powerful information that you're sharing here, Maya. And so
If we were to summarize, so to speak, in terms of key takeaways from today's podcast and show, what would be your critical next steps? What would you summarize and someone just joining in to say about perception, how it affects their leadership skills, their relationship skills, and what they can do to improve it?
Well, the bottom line, the summary of the discussion is in a business or management global leadership context, there always seems to be these questions. Do our perceptions make us better as an employee or as a leader? And if they're not making us better, can we get them to make us better? So to fully understand the question of perception in the context of leadership, we had to look at the perception from both sides. Their perceptions that leaders have of themselves, their perception that employees have of the leaders and themselves as well. And those can be two entirely different concepts. So better manager has to ask better questions and generally listen to the answers. Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to polish our perception, get that perception to work with us versus against us. Going back to my example, someone tells me they're reflecting and recharging. Here I'm thinking they're disrespecting. So be able to pause, reflect, evaluate, interpret, predict, and correlate in order to be more efficient in this ever-changing global business world, getting yourself aligned to the extent possible to the concept of business reality in order to be what? More effective, better leader, make better decisions, increase your chances of success. Yeah. So that's like
the Cliff Notes version of it. Good, because I know sometimes people just don't have all the time to, listen to the entire podcast. So thank you so much, Maya, and for people listening on, I think that this book, my perception is that this book is a game changer. I love the practical approach to something that has been there to me and what I've been practicing as a coach for a long time, and trying to get us to understand ourselves, to peel back the layers, to understand our belief systems, where they came from, and how they can, literally skew how we see the world, which can impact negatively or positively the relationships, the business relationships, the success, our value as leaders. So I recommend that you take the index, the Perception Power Index. I certainly recommend that you get your hands on the book, The Power of Perception, by Dr. Maja Zelihic and Dr. Diane Hamilton, and definitely not just read, but implement. Okay, so have a good day, everyone. Thanks again, Maya, and appreciate your time, your effort, your research, and your wisdom. Thanks again, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Shane. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of your listeners. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay.